Welcome back, ambitious one. You've returned, rested, and ready to go deeper. In Part 1, we explored 5 ancient agreements, 5 invisible contracts that control how billions live. But those 5, they operate in the external world, in social structures, in institutions. The 4 agreements we explore tonight, they operate somewhere deeper, inside you, in your psychology, in your perception, in your very experience of being alive. These control how you experience time, how you respond to pain and pleasure, how you construct meaning, and how you relate to mortality. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss future insights, future tools for mastering the invisible forces that shape your life. Now, let us begin. The 6th ancient agreement awaits. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let's discover together what the most powerful families in history understood about the future. The journey continues. The 6th agreement, the future belongs to those who plan it. We move forward now, to Renaissance Florence, to the banking houses of the Medici family, around the year 1400, in a counting room, lit by candles, a man sits with ledgers, calculating, planning, thinking not in days, not in months, but in generations. The Medici understood something that changed the nature of power itself. They understood the 6th ancient agreement. The future belongs to those who plan it, and planning requires delaying gratification, sacrificing present pleasure for future control. Before complex societies, humans lived in the present, immediate, responsive to current conditions. If you were hungry, you ate. If you were tired, you slept. If you wanted something, you pursued it. This makes sense in a world without storage, without security, without guaranteed tomorrows. But the Medici lived in a different world, a world where the future could be shaped, controlled, owned. And they realized whoever controls the future controls everything. So they planted seeds, generations before harvest. They lent money to kings, knowing that debts create obligations. Obligations create influence. Influence creates power. They invested in art, in architecture, in culture, knowing that cultural capital translates to political capital, sometimes more reliably than military force. They educated their children meticulously, trained them in finance, politics, statecraft, creating a dynasty that would influence Europe for centuries. Think about the psychology here, the incredible discipline, the almost inhuman patience. A Medici banker makes a decision today, knowing he won't see the full results in his lifetime, knowing his grandchildren will reap the benefits or suffer the consequences. This requires a particular mindset, a particular agreement with yourself and with time. The agreement says, present desires are less important than future position. Immediate gratification is the enemy of long-term power. Patience is the ultimate competitive advantage. This agreement creates tremendous inequality, but also tremendous achievement. Those who can delay gratification, who can plan across decades, across generations, accumulate staggering advantages over those who cannot. They build institutions, while others build nothing. They create systems, while others react to systems. They shape the future, while others simply inhabit it. Fast forward to today, and this agreement is more relevant than ever. The most powerful families, corporations, institutions think in time frames that ordinary people cannot imagine. They make investments that won't mature for 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. They play games where the board is so large, the timeline so extended, that most people don't even realize a game is being played. Meanwhile, most individuals struggle to plan beyond next month, next year, maybe the next 5 years. They react to the world, rather than shaping it, because they cannot or will not embrace the 6th agreement. A thought experiment, your 10-year plan. Here's what I want you to imagine, and really engage with this. Really think it through. It's January 2026 right now, and I'm giving you a challenge. Design your life for January 2036. 10 years from now? Exactly. Not vague dreams, Not general hopes, but specific, concrete, detailed plans. Where will you live? In what kind of dwelling? In what location? What will you do for work? For income? For purpose? Who will be in your life? What relationships? What family? What friendships? What will you have built, created, achieved? What capabilities will you have developed? What skills mastered? What knowledge acquired? What will your health be like? Your fitness, your vitality, your energy? What will your financial situation be? Your assets, your income streams, your security? Take a moment and really envision this in detail, in specificity, in concrete reality. Got it? Good. Now, here's the first brutal question. Based on your current trajectory, based on what you're doing today, based on your current habits, choices, behaviors, will you actually arrive at that vision? Be honest. Brutally honest. For most people, the answer is no. The life they're living today does not lead to the life they imagine in 10 years. There's a gap, a massive gap, between current trajectory and desired destination. And here's why this matters. Here's why the sixth ancient agreement is so powerful. That gap represents the difference between people who plan the future and people who simply experience it. The second brutal question, what would you have to do, starting today, to actually reach that 10-year vision? Not what would be nice to do, not what would be comfortable to do. What would you actually have to do? Let's break this down, because this is where most people's planning falls apart. In year 1, 2026, what has to happen? Probably, you need to make some foundational changes. Maybe you need to start learning a skill that will take years to master. Maybe you need to start building a business that won't be profitable for years. Maybe you need to start investing money that won't compound significantly for years. Maybe you need to start building relationships that won't pay off for years. Maybe you need to change habits that will only show results over years. All of these require sacrifice now, for benefits later. This is the core challenge of the sixth agreement. In year 2 and 3, 2027 to 2028, what has to happen? The foundation you laid in year 1 needs to deepen, strengthen, expand. You're not seeing major results yet. You won't for a while. But you have to keep going. Keep investing, keep sacrificing, keep delaying gratification. This is where most people quit, because the results aren't visible yet. The payoff isn't tangible. The sacrifice feels too costly. They want immediate returns, immediate validation, immediate gratification. So they abandon the long-term plan and revert to short-term thinking in years 4 and 5, 2029 to 2030. What has to happen? If you stay disciplined, if you've maintained the plan, you might start seeing early results. Not the full vision. Not yet, but hints of it, glimpses of it. Early manifestations. This is encouraging. This is validating. This is what keeps you going. But it's also dangerous, because early success can make you complacent, can make you ease off, can make you think you can coast. You can't. The hardest work is still ahead. In years 6 through 8, 2031 to 233, what has to happen? This is the scaling phase, the multiplication phase, the compounding phase. Everything you built in the first 5 years now starts to accelerate, to expand, to multiply. But only if you keep investing, keep building, keep planning, keep sacrificing. The temptation here is to start consuming, to start enjoying, to start spending the fruits of your labor. And yes, some of that is appropriate, some of that is necessary, but not too much. Not yet, because you're not at the vision yet. In years 9 and 10, 2034 to 2036, what has to happen? This is the consolidation phase, the refinement phase, the actualization phase. You're approaching the vision. You're getting close, you're almost there. But there are final pushes required, final investments needed, final sacrifices demanded. And if you make them, if you stay disciplined, if you maintain the plan, you arrive. January 2036. You're living the life you envisioned 10 years earlier. Not by accident, not by luck, but by design, by planning, by delayed gratification, by embracing the sixth ancient agreement. Now, the third and most brutal question. Are you actually willing to do all of that? Are you willing to sacrifice 10 years to build something that doesn't exist yet? Are you willing to delay gratification? To make choices that feel painful now? For rewards that are abstract and distant? Most people, if they're honest, aren't. They want the 10-year result without the 10-year process. They want the vision without the sacrifice. They want the future without the planning. And so, they never get it. They reach January 2036, and their life looks almost exactly like it did in January 2026. 10 years passed, but nothing changed, because they never embraced the sixth agreement. The tool, strategic patience and future engineering. Here's how you actually use the sixth ancient agreement as a tool. How you become someone who plans the future, rather than just experiencing it. First principle, accept that meaningful achievement requires time. This sounds obvious, but most people don't actually believe it, don't actually act like it's true. They want quick results, fast success, immediate validation, and when things don't happen quickly, they assume it's not working, and they quit. But truly valuable things, things that last, things that matter, they take time. Building a business that generates significant wealth, 5 to 10 years minimum. Developing expertise that makes you irreplaceable, 7 to 10 years minimum. Creating a body of work that establishes your reputation, 10 to 15 years minimum. Building relationships that provide genuine support and opportunity. Decades. These timelines aren't depressing, they're liberating, because once you accept them, you stop expecting immediate results. You stop getting discouraged by slow progress. You stop quitting prematurely. You settle in for the long game, and paradoxically, that's when you start making real progress. Second principle, work backwards from the vision. Most people plan forwards. What should I do tomorrow, next week, next month? This creates incremental thinking. Small steps, conservative choices. Instead, start with the 10-year vision, the 20-year vision, the end state, then work backwards. If that's where I want to be in 10 years, where do I need to be in 5 years? If that's where I need to be in 5 years, where do I need to be in 2 years? If that's where I need to be in 2 years, what do I need to do this month? This creates clarity, creates urgency, creates alignment between daily actions and long-term goals. Third principle, create inflection points, not linear growth. Here's something the Medici understood, that most modern planners miss. Progress isn't linear, it's exponential. It comes in jumps, in inflection points. You spend years building, with minimal visible results. Then, suddenly, everything changes. A skill reaches critical mass, and opportunities explode. A network reaches critical density, and connections multiply. An investment reaches critical size, and compounding accelerates. A reputation reaches critical awareness, and demand skyrockets. These inflection points can't be rushed, but they can be planned for. You identify what needs to reach critical mass. Then you invest systematically, until it does. Most people quit right before the inflection point, because they don't understand this dynamic. They see years of slow progress and assume that's all there will ever be. But if they just held on, just kept investing, the inflection was right around the corner. Fourth principle, build systems, not goals. Goals are about reaching a destination. Systems are about creating a process. Goals are fragile, systems are resilient. If your goal is to make $1 million and you don't reach it, you've failed. If your system is to create value and capture a portion of that value, and you follow that system for 10 years, success is nearly inevitable. The Medici didn't have a goal of control Florence by 1434. They had a system of lend money strategically, invest in culture systematically, educate our children comprehensively. That system, followed over generations, led to control, to influence, to power. Your 10-year plan shouldn't be a list of goals. It should be a set of systems. Systems for learning, systems for building, systems for connecting, systems for creating value. Follow the systems, and the outcomes take care of themselves. Fifth principle: sacrifice strategically, not blindly. The sixth agreement requires sacrifice, requires delayed gratification, requires trading present pleasure for future power. But not all sacrifices are equal. Not all delays are valuable. Some sacrifices build toward the future you want. Others just make you miserable. The key is strategic sacrifice, conscious trade-offs, deliberate choices about what to give up now and what to preserve. Maybe you sacrifice leisure time, but preserve time with loved ones. Maybe you sacrifice expensive vacations, but preserve health and fitness. Maybe you sacrifice social status now, but preserve your integrity and authenticity. The Medici sacrificed immediate consumption of wealth, but they didn't sacrifice family, didn't sacrifice beauty, didn't sacrifice meaning. They lived well while planning magnificently. This is the art, balancing present quality of life with future planning. Too much present focus and you never build anything lasting. Too much future focus and you miss your life. You sacrifice your present self for a future self that might never appreciate it. The deeper tool, the master-level insight, the most powerful version of the sixth agreement, isn't planning your own future. It's planning futures that extend beyond your lifetime. This is what the Medici truly mastered. Cosimo de' Medici planned for his great-grandchildren, knowing he'd never meet them, never see their success, never receive their gratitude. But he planned anyway, because the vision was larger than one lifetime, larger than one person. This is the ultimate form of delayed gratification, working for results you'll never see, for people who don't exist yet, for a legacy that outlasts your physical presence. Why would anyone do this? Because it's the ultimate form of power, the ultimate form of immortality, the ultimate form of meaning. Your body dies, your wealth gets spent, your achievements get forgotten. But systems you create, institutions you build, ideas you plant, these can live for generations, for centuries, for millennia. The sixth ancient agreement, mastered at this level, transcends individual ambition. It becomes about shaping the future itself, about influencing the world long after you're gone, about mattering in a way that ordinary achievement never can. As you drift into sleep, consider this. What are you building that will outlast you? What are you planting that you'll never see bloom? What future are you creating, not just for yourself, but for those who come after? The sixth ancient agreement says the future belongs to those who plan it, but the deepest version says, the future belongs to those who plan it. For others, for generations unborn, for a world they'll never see. This requires a kind of faith, a kind of hope, a kind of love for humanity itself. It's rare, it's difficult, it's almost superhuman, but it's also the most powerful thing you can do, because individuals die, but well-designed futures, well-planted seeds, well-built systems, these live on. The Medici lived and died centuries ago, but their planning, their vision, their strategic patience still shapes the world today. That's the power, that's the tool, that's the mastery of the sixth ancient agreement, not just planning your future, but planning the future itself. Are you ambitious enough for that? Are you patient enough for that? Are you wise enough for that? Those questions will determine everything. The seventh agreement, pain and pleasure control, everything our journey takes us now, to ancient India, to the teachings of the Buddha. Around 500 years before the Common Era, under the Bodhi tree, a man sits in meditation and reaches a profound understanding, an understanding that reveals the seventh ancient agreement. All human behavior, all human suffering, all human achievement comes down to two fundamental forces: the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. This is the seventh agreement. You will do almost anything to avoid pain and pursue pleasure, and whoever controls these forces controls you. The Buddha saw this clearly, saw how humans are driven, compelled, controlled by these twin forces. We chase what feels good, we flee what feels bad. And this simple mechanism explains nearly everything. But here's what makes this profound. What makes this an agreement rather than just an observation. Pain and pleasure are not objective. They are constructed, conditioned, programmed. What feels painful to one person might feel neutral to another, might even feel pleasurable to a third. What seems like obvious pleasure to one culture might seem like corruption or sin to another. This means pain and pleasure can be engineered, can be designed, can be used to control behavior on a massive scale. Think about how this works. As you breathe, relax, drift. A child in ancient India, raised in a strict caste system, learns early that violating caste rules brings social pain, ostracism, shame, suffering. They learn that following caste rules brings social pleasure, acceptance, belonging, security. These associations become neurological, automatic, unconscious. The child grows into an adult who doesn't consciously choose to follow caste rules. They simply do. Because the pain-pleasure wiring is so deep, so complete, that alternatives don't even feel possible. This is how the seventh agreement controls behavior, not through force, not through rational argument, but through conditioning, through the manipulation of what feels good and what feels bad. The powerful have always understood this. They make obedience pleasurable through rewards, status, belonging, validation. They make disobedience painful through punishment, shame, exclusion, suffering. And once these associations are established, control becomes automatic, self-enforcing, invisible. People police themselves. Their own pain-pleasure responses doing the work that armies and prisons once required. Fast forward to modernity, and this agreement has reached sophisticated, almost artistic levels. Marketing creates pleasure associations with products, consumption, brands, lifestyles. Social media creates pain associations with missing out, being excluded, being unfollowed, being criticized. Political systems create pleasure associations with voting for certain parties, supporting certain causes, expressing certain opinions. Educational systems create pain associations with failure, rejection, not measuring up. Workplace cultures create pleasure associations with overwork, availability, constant productivity. The entire architecture of modern life is designed, deliberately or accidentally, to manipulate your pain-pleasure responses. You're rewarded for compliance, punished for deviation, conditioned to want what serves the system and fear what threatens it. A thought experiment, the pleasure-pain reversal. Now, I'm going to guide you through something powerful, something that could change how you see everything. I want you to think about something you currently avoid, something that feels painful, difficult, unpleasant. Maybe it's exercise, physical discomfort, sweating, exhaustion. Maybe it's difficult conversations, conflict, confrontation, emotional tension. Maybe it's deep work, intense focus, mental strain, cognitive effort. Maybe it's solitude, silence, being alone with your thoughts, without distraction. Whatever it is, identify it clearly. Feel the resistance. Notice the aversion. This thing, this painful thing. You avoid it. You flee from it. You organize your life to minimize exposure to it. This is the seventh ancient agreement in action, your pain response controlling your behavior. Now, here's the experiment. What if that pain response is wrong? What if the thing you're avoiding is actually the thing you need most? Let's take exercise as an example, because it's visceral, physical, undeniable. Exercise feels painful in the moment. Your muscles burn, your lungs struggle, your body screams to stop. Every fiber of your being says, this is bad, avoid this, stop this. But you know, intellectually, that exercise is good for you. It makes you healthier, stronger, more energetic, more capable. The pain is real, but the pain is lying to you. It's telling you that exercise is harmful, when actually, it's beneficial. Your pain response, Your most primal guidance system is giving you false information. Now expand this insight. What if the pain you feel around difficult conversations is also lying? What if the discomfort of confrontation is actually protecting something valuable, teaching you something important, making you stronger? What if the pain you feel around deep work, around intense focus, is not a warning sign, but a growth sign? What if the suffering you experience in solitude, in silence, in being with yourself without distraction, is actually the path to self-knowledge, to clarity, to freedom? This is radical. This is uncomfortable. This is why most people never do this exercise, because it requires questioning your most fundamental guidance system, your pain-pleasure responses. It requires saying, my feelings might be wrong. My impulses might be lying. My immediate reactions might be steering me away from what I actually need. Now, the reversal. What if you could reprogram your pain-pleasure responses? What if you could make difficult things feel good and easy things feel dangerous? This sounds impossible. It sounds like denying your nature, fighting your biology, but it's not. It's actually how all mastery works. Athletes have reprogrammed their pain-pleasure responses around physical discomfort. What feels excruciating to an untrained person feels good to them, feels like progress, feels like achievement. Entrepreneurs have reprogrammed their responses around risk and uncertainty. What feels terrifying to most people feels exciting to them, feels like opportunity, feels like life. Artists have reprogrammed their responses around criticism and rejection. What feels devastating to an amateur feels like feedback to them, feels like data, feels like part of the process. The experiment is this. For the next 30 days, actively seek one thing that currently feels painful, not harmfully painful, not dangerous painful, but growth painful, difficult painful, uncomfortable painful. The kind of pain that signals you're expanding beyond your current limits. Maybe it's physical training, pushing your body beyond its comfort zone. Maybe it's intellectual challenge, studying something difficult, something that makes your brain hurt. Maybe it's emotional honesty, having hard conversations, expressing difficult truths. Maybe it's creative risk, sharing work that feels vulnerable, exposing yourself to potential criticism. Whatever it is, commit to it for 30 days. And here's the key. Notice what happens to your pain-pleasure response. In the first few days, it feels awful. It feels wrong. Every cell in your body wants to quit. This is your old programming, your conditioned response, the seventh ancient agreement asserting control. But push through. Keep going. Stay with the discomfort. Around day 7 to 10, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it changes. You start to recognize it, not as a warning, but as a signal of growth. By day 20, the pain might actually start to feel good, not in a masochistic way, but in a meaningful way. It starts to feel like progress, like strengthening, like becoming. By day 30, you've fundamentally rewired your response. What used to feel painful now feels purposeful. What used to feel like suffering now feels like sacrifice, and sacrifice feels like investment. You've reprogrammed yourself. You've taken control of the seventh ancient agreement. You've turned it from a controller into a tool. The tool, pain-pleasure engineering. Here's how you systematically use the seventh ancient agreement as a tool, rather than being controlled by it. First principle, audit your current pain-pleasure responses. Most people have no idea what actually drives them, what they're actually avoiding, what they're actually pursuing. They just react, automatically, unconsciously, according to programming they didn't choose. So start by mapping it out. What do you avoid, and why? What do you pursue, and why? What feels painful, and is that pain accurate? Or is it conditioned? What feels pleasurable, and is that pleasure serving you, or controlling you? This audit, this honest self-examination, is uncomfortable, because you'll discover that much of what you avoid, you should pursue, And much of what you pursue, you should avoid. Your pain-pleasure responses are not optimized for your long-term success, your deep fulfillment, your genuine growth. They're optimized for short-term comfort, immediate safety, evolutionary survival in environments that no longer exist. Second principle, identify whose pleasure you're serving. This is subtle, but crucial. When you feel pleasure from something, ask yourself, whose pleasure is this really? Is this making you feel good, or is it making you look good? Is this satisfying your genuine needs, or satisfying social expectations? Is this bringing you joy, or bringing you approval? Much of what we experience as pleasure is actually social reward, status validation, group acceptance. It's not genuinely pleasurable to us, it's pleasurable to our reputation, our image, our social standing. This is how the seventh agreement controls populations, by making social approval feel good and social disapproval feel bad. Society can control behavior, without force, without law, just through pleasure and pain. Once you recognize this, once you distinguish between genuine pleasure and social pleasure, you can start making different choices. You can pursue things that genuinely satisfy you, even if they don't impress others. You can avoid things that gain approval, but hollow you out. This is freedom, real freedom. Freedom from the seventh ancient agreement. Third principle, deliberately associate pain with harmful pleasures. Some pleasures are genuinely harmful, addictive pleasures, distracting pleasures, pleasures that feel good in the moment but create suffering over time. Junk food, mindless entertainment, gossip, procrastination, shallow validation. These things trigger pleasure responses, but they don't serve your long-term interests, so you need to reprogram, to create pain associations, to make your immediate response match reality. This is hard, because you're fighting biology, fighting conditioning, fighting habit, but it's possible. Every time you indulge a harmful pleasure, immediately follow it with a pain reminder. Feel how it makes you sluggish. Notice how it wastes your time. Recognize how it diminishes you. Make the negative consequences conscious, immediate, visceral. Over time, your brain learns the pleasure isn't worth the pain, and the craving diminishes. Fourth principle, deliberately associate pleasure with beneficial pains. This is the opposite, and equally important. Some pains are genuinely beneficial. Growth pains, challenge pains, pains that signal you're expanding beyond your current limits, difficult workouts, hard conversations, deep study, creative struggle, uncomfortable truths. These things trigger pain responses, but they serve your long-term interests, so you need to reprogram, to create pleasure associations, to make your immediate response match reality. Every time you embrace a beneficial pain, immediately focus on the positive consequences. Feel how it makes you stronger. Notice how it expands your capabilities. Recognize how it makes you more. Make the benefits conscious, immediate, emotionally real. Over time, your brain learns the pain is worth the pleasure, and the resistance diminishes. Eventually, the pain itself becomes pleasurable, becomes a sign of growth, becomes something you crave. Fifth principle, use strategic deprivation. This is an advanced technique, but incredibly powerful. If you want to make something feel pleasurable, make it scarce, make it rare, make it earned. Our brains are wired to value scarcity, to crave what's withheld, to find pleasure in what's occasional rather than constant. So if you want to enjoy food more, eat less frequently, make meals special. If you want to enjoy entertainment more, limit it severely, make it a reward rather than a default. If you want to enjoy social interaction more, embrace more solitude, make connection precious. If you want to enjoy rest more, work harder, make relaxation earned. This seems counterintuitive, deprivation creating pleasure, but it's psychologically true. It's how pleasure actually works. Constant availability creates tolerance, adaptation, diminishing returns. Strategic scarcity creates appreciation, anticipation, genuine satisfaction. The Medici understood this. They used strategic deprivation to maintain desire, to create value, to control through pleasure rather than pain. The deeper tool, the master-level technique, the most sophisticated use of the seventh ancient agreement, is to become someone who genuinely enjoys what's difficult, not someone who tolerates difficulty, not someone who endures it, but someone who genuinely finds pleasure in it. This is what separates masters from amateurs. In any field, in any domain, amateurs struggle against difficulty. They suffer through it. They wish it would end. Masters enjoy difficulty. They seek it out. They find pleasure in the challenge itself. This isn't about being superhuman. It's about complete rewiring of pain-pleasure responses. A master athlete feels pleasure in the burn, in the exhaustion, in the edge of their limits. A master thinker feels pleasure in confusion, in complexity, in problems that don't have easy answers. A master artist feels pleasure in criticism, in failure, in the gap between vision and execution. These responses aren't natural. They're engineered. They're the result of deliberate reprogramming over years. But once achieved, they create an insurmountable advantage, because you're now motivated toward things that others avoid, energized by challenges that others flee, sustained by difficulties that others find draining. You've turned the seventh ancient agreement into your servant, your tool, your competitive advantage. As you settle into sleep, into rest, into peace, consider this. What pain are you avoiding that you should embrace? What pleasure are you pursuing that you should resist? And what would your life look like? What would you achieve? What would you become if you had complete control over your pain-pleasure responses? If nothing felt too hard because you'd learned to find pleasure in difficulty? If nothing felt too tempting because you'd learned to find pain in hollow pleasures? This is the ultimate freedom. Freedom from the seventh ancient agreement, not by denying pain and pleasure, but by choosing them, by engineering them, by making them serve you instead of control you. The Buddha taught transcendence of these forces, but for those of us still engaged with the world, still building, still striving, the lesson is different. Master these forces. Rewire these responses. Make pain and pleasure your tools, not your masters. And then, nothing can control you. Nothing can manipulate you. Nothing can stop you, because you've conquered the most fundamental control mechanism, the one that governs all human behavior. You've become free. The eighth agreement, stories are more powerful than facts. We journey now to oral traditions, to the fireside gatherings, to the origin of storytelling itself, long before writing, before cities, before civilization as we know it. Humans sat together in the darkness and told stories, stories of gods, heroes, monsters, creation, destruction, meaning. And in the telling, in the listening, in the believing, something extraordinary happened. Reality changed. This is the eighth ancient agreement. Stories are more powerful than facts, and whoever controls the stories controls reality itself. Before you dismiss this, before you think stories are just entertainment, just fantasy, consider. What is money but a story we all agree to believe? Those pieces of paper, those digital numbers, have no intrinsic value. Their power comes entirely from the shared story, the collective belief that they represent value. What is a nation but a story? Borders don't exist in nature. They're imaginary lines, made real only by the story that millions accept, defend, die for. What is your identity, your career, your status, your goals? All stories, narratives you've accepted, internalized, made real through belief in action. The ancient storytellers understood this. They knew that facts are cold, inert, powerless. But stories move people, inspire them, control them, shape their entire perception of reality. A fact says, this happened. A story says, this happened, and here's what it means. Here's how you should feel about it. Here's what you should do because of it. Facts provide information. Stories provide meaning. And humans, ambitious humans especially, crave meaning more than information. Think about the great empires, the powerful movements, the revolutionary changes throughout history. They didn't succeed because they had better facts. They succeeded because they had better stories. The Roman Empire told a story of civilization versus barbarism, order versus chaos. Christianity told a story of salvation, redemption, eternal life. The American Revolution told a story of freedom, rights, human dignity. Communism told a story of workers' liberation, class struggle, inevitable progress. Capitalism tells a story of individual achievement, market efficiency, prosperity through competition. Each story more powerful than armies, more compelling than gold, more enduring than monuments. Because stories live in minds, in hearts, in the collective imagination, and once a story takes hold, it creates its own reality. People begin to behave as if the story is true, and their behavior makes it true. This is the power and the danger of the Eighth Agreement. In the modern world, whoever controls the dominant narratives controls everything. Media corporations, political parties, corporations, educational institutions, influential individuals. They're all in the business of storytelling. They're not primarily sharing facts. They're crafting narratives, frameworks, meaning structures. They tell you stories about success, about failure, about who deserves what, about what's possible, about what's inevitable. And these stories, subtle, pervasive, repeated endlessly, become the lens through which you see everything. You think you're thinking independently, but you're thinking through story structures planted long ago. You think you're pursuing your own goals, but you're following plot lines written by others. This is not a conspiracy. It's simply how human cognition works. We are storytelling animals. We cannot help but organize experience into narratives. The question is, whose narratives are you living in? A thought experiment. Competing stories of your life. Here's an exercise. Powerful, unsettling, potentially transformative. I'm going to tell you the story of your life. The same life, in 3 completely different ways. And I want you to notice how each story makes you feel, how each story changes what seems true, how each story alters what seems possible. Story 1. The victim's tale. You were born into a world you didn't choose, into circumstances beyond your control. Maybe you had advantages. Maybe you had disadvantages. But either way, you didn't choose them. Throughout your life, forces larger than yourself have shaped your path. Economic systems you didn't design. Social hierarchies you didn't create. Cultural expectations you didn't set. You've done your best, worked hard, tried to succeed. But the deck was stacked. The game was rigged. The system was designed for certain people to win. And maybe you weren't one of them. Your struggles, your failures, your disappointments, they weren't really your fault. You were playing an unfair game, following rules that disadvantaged you, competing against people with unfair advantages. Yes, you've had some successes, but imagine what you could have achieved if circumstances had been different, if opportunities had been equal, if the world had been fair. Your story is a story of constraint, of limitation, of potential unrealized because of external forces. Now, notice how that story feels. Does it make you angry, resentful, bitter? Does it make you feel powerless, trapped, small? Does it excuse your failures, justify your position, explain why you haven't achieved more? This story has a certain comfort, doesn't it? Because if external forces control everything, then you're not responsible. Then your struggles aren't your fault. Then you can stop striving and simply accept. Story 2. The hero's journey. You were born with potential, with capabilities, with unique gifts. Your circumstances, whatever they were, became the forge that shaped you, the challenges that strengthened you, the obstacles that revealed your character. Throughout your life, you faced tests, overcome barriers, grown through struggle. Every setback was a lesson. Every failure was preparation. Every difficulty was an opportunity to become more. You've made choices, some good, some bad. But they were your choices, and they made you who you are. Your successes came from your efforts, your discipline, your courage to try when others wouldn't. Your failures came from your mistakes, your weaknesses, your moments of giving up. But even those taught you something. You are the protagonist of your own story, the hero of your own journey, the author of your own becoming. What you've achieved, you earned. What you've built, you created. What you become, you forged through decision and action. And what you haven't achieved yet is still possible, is still ahead, is waiting for you to rise to the challenge. Your story is a story of agency, of growth, of potential becoming actual through choice and effort. Now, notice how that story feels. Does it make you energized, motivated, empowered? Does it make you feel responsible, capable, excited about possibility? Does it demand more of you, challenge you to step up, call you to become greater? This story has a certain burden, doesn't it? Because if you control your destiny, then you're responsible for your results. Then your struggles are your challenges to overcome. Then you can't rest until you've fulfilled your potential. Story 3. The cosmic accident. You were born by random chance, in a universe without inherent meaning, as a temporary arrangement of matter and energy. Your consciousness, your sense of self, your feeling of importance. These are biological accidents, evolutionary adaptations, ultimately illusions. Throughout your life, you've experienced things, pursued things, achieved things, suffered things. But none of it matters. Not really. Not cosmically. Not eternally.
In 100 years, you'll be forgotten. In 1,000 years, everything you built will be dust. In 1,000,000 years, the human species itself might be extinct. Your successes, meaningless. Your failures, meaningless. Your struggles and triumphs, equally meaningless. In the grand scope of time and space, you are a brief flicker of awareness in an indifferent universe.
That doesn't care about you, doesn't judge you, doesn't remember you. Your story is not a story at all. It's just a sequence of events, without inherent meaning, without cosmic significance, without ultimate purpose. Now, notice how that story feels. Does it make you feel small, insignificant, depressed? Does it make everything seem pointless, futile, not worth the effort? Does it create a kind of nihilistic freedom, where nothing matters so you might as well do whatever you want? This story has a certain liberation, doesn't it? Because if nothing matters, then you're free from obligation, free from judgment, free from the pressure to achieve or become anything in particular. Now, here's the crucial insight. All 3 stories are equally true
and equally false. They're all interpretations, frameworks, narratives imposed on the same set of facts. Your life, the actual events, the actual experiences, the actual circumstances, those are just data points. The story you tell about those data points, that's what creates meaning, creates emotion, creates motivation, or paralysis. And here's what makes this profound.
What makes this the 8th ancient agreement revealing itself. You get to choose which story you tell. Not completely, not without constraints, not without resistance from other storytellers, but to a significant degree. The narrative of your life is yours to craft. Most people don't realize this. They accept the stories they're told, by parents, by culture, by media, by circumstances. They live inside inherited narratives, never questioning them, never recognizing them as stories rather than truth. But once you see the 8th agreement, once you understand that stories create reality, you gain the ability to become your own storyteller, to craft narratives that serve you rather than limit you, to tell stories that empower you
rather than diminish you, to choose interpretative frameworks that make you stronger rather than weaker. The tool narrative mastery and strategic storytelling. Here's how you use the 8th ancient agreement as a tool, how you become a conscious storyteller rather than an unconscious story consumer. First principle, recognize the stories you're currently living in.
This is harder than it sounds because the most powerful stories are invisible. They don't announce themselves as stories. They present themselves as truth, as reality, as just the way things are. So you have to actively excavate them. Bring them to consciousness. Examine them as constructs rather than accepting them as facts. What story do you tell about your childhood, about your family, about where you came from? Is it a story of advantage or disadvantage, of support or neglect, of opportunity or constraint? What story do you tell about your abilities, about your intelligence, about your potential? Is it a story of gifted talent or hard-won skill, of natural limits or unlimited growth, of fixed traits or malleable capabilities? What story do you tell about your industry, about your market, about the economy? Is it a story of scarcity or abundance, of zero-sum competition or positive-sum creation, of gatekeepers or open access? What story do you tell about success, about wealth, about achievement? Is it a story of luck or effort, of exploitation or value creation?
Of zero-sum redistribution or positive-sum growth. Each of these stories shapes what you think is possible, what you think you deserve, what you think is worth pursuing. And most people never examine them, never question them, never realize their stories at all. Second principle, understand who benefits from the stories you believe. This is crucial and often uncomfortable.
Many of the stories you've internalized serve someone else's interests, not yours. The story that you can't succeed without a degree from an elite university. Who benefits from that story? Elite universities. Who maintain their status and pricing power through that narrative? The story that you need to work for a corporation for 30 years to have security? Who benefits? Corporations. Who get loyal, compliant, risk-averse employees. The story that success requires sacrifice of health, relationships, and personal well-being. Who benefits? Systems that extract maximum productivity from humans at minimal cost. The story that your worth is determined by your productivity and earnings. Who benefits?
Economic systems that need you to keep producing, keep consuming, keep chasing more. The story that changing your circumstances is nearly impossible, so accept your lot. Who benefits? Those who benefit from maintaining current power structures, current hierarchies, current distributions of resources. This isn't to say all these stories are entirely false. Some contain truth.
Some reflect real constraints. But they're never just neutral descriptions of reality. They're always narratives that serve certain interests. And if you blindly accept them, you're serving those interests, often at the expense of your own. Third principle. Craft counter-narratives that serve your ambitions. Once you recognize limiting stories, you can craft alternatives, not fantasy stories, not delusional stories, but alternative interpretations of the same facts that open possibilities rather than close them. If the dominant story says people like you don't succeed in this field, craft a counter-narrative. People told, successful person from similar background, that too, and they proved it wrong. That story is designed to prevent competition.
But it's not actually true. The barriers are real, but not insurmountable, and I have unique advantages precisely because of my background. If the dominant story says you're too old to start, craft a counter-narrative. Age brings experience, perspective, resources, networks, emotional maturity. I'm not starting from zero. I'm starting from accumulated wisdom.
And that's an advantage, not a disadvantage. If the dominant story says the market is saturated, there's no room for new players. Craft a counter-narrative. Every saturated market has inefficiencies, unserved needs, opportunities for differentiation, and new entrants with fresh perspectives often see what established players miss. Saturation creates complacency.
And complacency creates opportunity. These aren't lies. They're not self-deception. They're alternative framings of reality. And framings matter. Framings determine action. Framings create or destroy possibility. Fourth principle. Tell stories that inspire action, not paralysis. Some stories, however true they might be, lead to passivity, to acceptance, to giving up.
These stories, even if factually accurate, don't serve you. Other stories inspire movement, create energy, generate motivation to try. These stories, even if they require some optimism, some faith, some selective attention, Serve your ambitions. The art is telling stories that are honest enough to be credible, but hopeful enough to inspire action. You don't want to lie to yourself, to create pure fantasy, to ignore real constraints, but you also don't want to dwell on limitations, to rehearse obstacles, to convince yourself of impossibility. Instead, acknowledge challenges while emphasizing agency. Yes, this will be difficult, and I have capabilities to handle difficulty. Yes, the odds are against me, and long odds have been beaten before, by people who tried when others wouldn't. Yes, I might fail, and failure would teach me something valuable, and trying matters more than guaranteed success. These are honest stories that inspire action, that create possibility, that serve ambition. Fifth principle: become a storyteller, not just a story consumer. This is where real power lies. Most people consume stories. They watch, they listen, they absorb, they accept. But powerful people create stories. They speak, they write, they frame, they define. If you can tell compelling stories, stories that resonate with others, stories that spread, stories that shape how groups think,
you've mastered the eighth ancient agreement completely. This is how leaders lead, how movements mobilize, how change happens. Not through force, not through facts, but through stories. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just present data about inequality. He told a story. I have a dream. Steve Jobs didn't just describe computer specifications. He told a story.
Think different. Effective politicians don't just cite policy positions. They tell stories about the kind of country they're building, the kind of future they're creating. You, as an ambitious person, need to develop this skill. The ability to craft narratives about yourself, about your work, about your vision, about what you're building. The ability to tell these stories compellingly, in ways that make people feel, make people believe, make people act. This isn't manipulation. It's communication. It's meaning-making. It's how humans actually process information and make decisions. Facts matter, but facts wrapped in compelling stories matter more. Data matters.
But data embedded in meaningful narratives matters more. Truth matters, but truth told as story matters more. The deeper tool, the master-level technique, the most sophisticated use of the eighth ancient agreement is to understand that reality itself is largely narrative. Not completely. There are objective facts, physical constraints, mathematical truths.
But much of what we call reality, especially social reality, economic reality, political reality, is actually shared storytelling. Money works because we collectively agree to the story that it has value. Companies exist because we collectively agree to the legal fiction of corporate personhood. Nations persist because we collectively agree to the story of borders and sovereignty. Status hierarchies function because we collectively agree on the story of who deserves respect and why. All of these are stories, made real through collective belief and coordinated action. And if you can tell new stories, stories that enough people accept and act upon, you can literally change reality. This is how revolutions happen, how new industries emerge, how social norms shift, how the impossible becomes inevitable. Someone tells a new story, a story that contradicts the dominant narrative. Actually, we don't need kings. We can govern ourselves. Actually, we don't need landlines. We can have phones in our pockets. Actually, we don't need traditional publishing. We can distribute directly to readers. At first, these stories seem absurd, impossible, delusional. But if the storyteller is compelling enough, if the story resonates with enough people, if the timing is right, the story spreads. And as it spreads, as more people believe it, as more people act as if it's true, it becomes true. The new story replaces the old story, and reality shifts. This is the ultimate power of the eighth ancient agreement, not just adapting to reality as it is, but telling stories that create new realities, that shift the collective narrative, that change what entire populations believe is possible. Very few people operate at this level, because it requires vision, courage, storytelling genius. But those who do,
Those who can craft and spread new narratives that replace old ones, they shape civilization itself. As you drift toward sleep, toward dreams, toward the realm where stories live most vividly, consider this. What story are you telling about your life right now? Is it a story that empowers you or diminishes you? Is it a story that creates possibility or forecloses it? Is it a story you chose consciously or inherited unconsciously? And what new story, what better narrative, what more empowering framework could you tell instead? The eighth ancient agreement says stories are more powerful than facts. This is true, deeply true, unchangeably true. So the question becomes, whose stories will you live in? Will you be a passive consumer of inherited narratives? Or will you be an active creator of chosen stories? Will you accept the dominant framework? Or will you craft alternatives that serve your vision? The ancient fireside storytellers understood stories create reality. The modern masters of influence understand stories create reality. And now you understand stories create reality.
So tell better stories. Craft empowering narratives. Become your own storyteller. And watch as the story you tell becomes the reality you live. This is the tool. This is the power. This is the mastery of the eighth ancient agreement. Not accepting stories as truth, but crafting stories as tools. Not being narrated by others, but narrating yourself. Not living in inherited plots, but writing your own. The story of your life is being written right now. Every moment, every choice, every interpretation. Make it a good story. Make it a true story. Make it a story worth telling. And in the telling, in the believing, in the acting as if, you make it real. The ninth agreement, death gives life meaning. Our final stop, our ultimate destination, takes us to ancient Egypt once more. But not to the pyramids, not to the palaces, to something smaller, more intimate, more personal, a burial chamber, deep underground, carved into living rock, where a person lies in eternal rest, surrounded by treasures, food, servants, everything they might need in the afterlife, walls covered in hieroglyphs,
Telling the story of their life, preserving their name, ensuring they're remembered. This is where we discover the ninth and final ancient agreement. Death gives life meaning, and whoever controls the narrative of death controls how people live. Every human knows they will die. This is the one absolute certainty, the one inescapable truth, the one universal experience. And this knowledge, this awareness of mortality, fundamentally shapes human behavior. Think about it, as you relax, as you breathe, as you settle deeper into comfort. If you were immortal, truly immortal, with infinite time, would you care about achievements, legacy, making your mark? Would urgency exist? Would ambition exist? Would meaning exist?
or would everything feel equally trivial, equally postponable, equally meaningless? The ancient Egyptians understood death is what makes life matter. Every moment becomes precious. Because moments are limited, finite, irreplaceable. Every choice becomes significant. Because you only get so many choices, so many days, so many years. Every relationship becomes valuable because the people you love will die, and you will die, and your time together is brief. But the Egyptians went further. They realized that if you control how people think about death, you control how they live. The elaborate burial rituals, the massive tombs, the complex religious texts, the detailed instructions for the afterlife. These weren't just about honoring the dead. They were about organizing the living. If you believe that your actions in life directly determine your experience after death, if you believe in judgment, in karma, in eternal consequences, then you'll behave very differently than if you believe death is simply the end. The pharaohs and priests understood this. They created a death narrative that required specific behaviors, specific offerings, specific obedience. You had to live correctly, die correctly, be buried correctly, to achieve eternal life. And correctly meant following the rules, respecting authority, maintaining the social order, serving the gods, serving the pharaoh. death, the most democratic of all experiences, the one thing that happens to everyone regardless of status, was transformed into a tool of control. This pattern repeats throughout history. Christianity promised eternal heaven or eternal hell. Based on how you lived, what you believed, who you obeyed, live righteously, believe the correct doctrines, follow the church's teachings, and you gain eternal bliss. Live sinfully, believe the wrong things, reject the church's authority, and you suffer eternal torment. This narrative, this story about death, controlled billions of humans for centuries. It determined their moral choices, their political allegiances, their daily behaviors, their entire worldview. Buddhism promised escape from the cycle of rebirth, liberation from suffering, but only through right action, right thinking, right practice. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path, transcend attachment, achieve enlightenment, and you break free from the wheel of death and rebirth. Fail to do so, remain trapped in delusion and desire, and you're condemned to endless cycles of suffering. Death, rebirth, suffering. This narrative shaped entire civilizations, created monasteries, directed countless lives towards specific practices and beliefs. Even secular ideologies use death. The promise of being remembered, of leaving a legacy, of mattering beyond your physical existence. Build something lasting, create something meaningful, contribute to progress, and your name will live on. Die without achievement, without legacy, without making a mark, and you'll be forgotten, erased, as if you never existed. All these narratives share something. They make your finite life feel consequential, meaningful, cosmically important, and that feeling, that sense of ultimate significance, shapes behavior more powerfully than any law or punishment. In the modern world, we like to think we've moved beyond these ancient beliefs.
We're rational, scientific, enlightened. We don't believe in literal afterlives or cosmic judgment, but the Ninth Agreement still controls us, just in different forms. We pursue legacies. We build things that will outlast us. We want to be remembered. We fear being forgotten, fear dying without meaning, fear that our life ultimately didn't matter. We create monuments, write books, build companies, have children, all attempts to transcend death through impact, through memory, through continuation. These fears drive enormous amounts of human behavior, human achievement, human suffering. Ambitious people especially feel this acutely. The drive to accomplish, to build, to create, to leave a mark,
Often comes from a deep terror of insignificance, of being erased by time, of dying unmourned and forgotten. A thought experiment. Your last day now. I want you to do something difficult, something that most people avoid, something that reveals everything. I want you to imagine, vividly, specifically, your last day alive, not in some distant abstract future, but as a real experience happening to you. The person you are right now. You wake up that morning, somehow knowing, this is it. Today is your last day. Tomorrow, you won't wake up, won't see another sunrise, won't have another chance. Today is all you have left. Feel that for a moment. Really feel it. Let the reality of it settle in. Now, what do you do with this last day?
This reveals everything. This shows you what actually matters to you, beneath all the noise, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the inherited stories. Do you go to work? Some people would, because work gives them meaning, purpose, identity. Their work is genuinely important to them. It's how they contribute, how they create value, how they express themselves. For these people, working on their last day wouldn't be a sacrifice. It would be a fulfillment. But others wouldn't, because they realize, in the clarity that death provides, that their work doesn't actually matter to them. They've been doing it for money, for status, for obligation, not for genuine meaning. And on their last day, with no tomorrow to worry about,
They'd choose something else. Do you seek out loved ones? Most people would. Because relationships, connections, love, these feel fundamentally important. You'd want to see your family, hold them, tell them what they mean to you. You'd want to see your friends, share memories, express gratitude, say goodbye. But this reveals something painful. If relationships matter most on your last day, why don't they matter most on every day? Why do we sacrifice time with people we love? For work we don't care about, for achievements that suddenly seem trivial. When death makes everything clear, do you try to accomplish one more thing? Some people would. One final project, one last creation, one more contribution. They'd write,
or paint, or build, or teach, trying to leave something behind, something that says, I was here, I mattered, I created something that will outlast me. This is the legacy impulse, the death-denying impulse, the attempt to transcend mortality through creation. But others wouldn't, because they realize legacy is an ego game, a fear-based grasping, an inability to accept finitude. On their last day, they'd let go of achievement, let go of leaving a mark, and simply be, simply exist, simply experience whatever time remains. Do you pursue pleasure? Some people would. They'd eat their favorite foods, visit their favorite places, do things that bring them joy, not because they're hedonistic, but because they realize experience itself has value, pleasure itself is meaningful, enjoyment itself matters. But others wouldn't, because they realize hedonic pleasure is shallow, fleeting, ultimately unsatisfying. On their last day, they'd seek something deeper, connection, meaning, truth, peace. Do you seek solitude? This is interesting and less common, but some people would.
They'd want to be alone, to reflect, to make peace with their life, to prepare for the transition. They'd want silence, stillness, space to contemplate, to integrate. For these people, their last day would be meditative, internal, a final reckoning with themselves. Now, here's the crucial question. Whatever you chose to do on your last day,
whatever felt most important, most meaningful, most true, why aren't you doing more of that now? Why aren't you organizing your life around what matters most? Why are you waiting for death to clarify what's important, when you could choose to live that clarity today? This is the power of the ninth ancient agreement. Death reveals truth. It strips away pretense,
burns away superficiality, dissolves false priorities. In the face of death, you see clearly what matters, what doesn't, what's real, what's performance. But here's the deeper insight. You don't have to wait for your actual last day to access this clarity. You can use death as a tool. Right now, today, to cut through confusion and see what's true. This is what philosophers have taught for millennia. Memento mori. Remember you will die. Not as a morbid obsession, not as a depressing resignation, but as a clarifying lens. When you remember death, when you hold mortality in awareness, everything changes. Trivial concerns shrink, meaningful priorities expand, clarity emerges. The question becomes, not what should I do,
but what matters enough to do with limited time. Not what will others think, but what will I regret not doing. Not what looks successful, but what feels true. The tool, death as a compass for living. Here's how you use the ninth ancient agreement as a tool. How you transform mortality from a source of fear into a source of clarity and power. First principle.
Accept death fully, completely, without bargaining. Most people, if they think about death at all, immediately start negotiating. Maybe I'll live to 90. Maybe medical technology will extend life. Maybe I have plenty of time left. This bargaining, this avoidance, this refusal to fully accept mortality, it prevents death from teaching you. Instead, accept it. Really accept it. You will die. Probably sooner than you think. Certainly sooner than you'd prefer. Every person you love will die. Every achievement you build will crumble. Every memory you make will fade. This sounds depressing, sounds nihilistic, sounds like it should lead to despair, but actually, it leads to clarity, to presence, to fierce prioritization, because if time is truly limited, if death is truly certain, if everything is truly temporary, then every moment matters. Every choice counts. Every day is precious. Second principle, use death as a decision filter. Whenever you're unclear about what to do, whenever you're torn between options, whenever you're confused about priorities, ask yourself, if I were dying in a year, what would I choose? This question cuts through everything. It reveals what's truly important versus what's socially acceptable. It shows what you genuinely want versus what you think you should want. It separates real ambition from borrowed ambition. If you were dying in a year, would you take that job for the money? If you were dying in a year, would you spend time with that person you don't actually like? If you were dying in a year, would you pursue that achievement that impresses others but doesn't fulfill you? The answers become obvious, immediate, clear. And here's the insight. You are dying, not in a year necessarily, but in some finite time frame, some limited number of days. So the answers you'd give if you had 1 year should be the answers you're living by now. Third principle, build legacy through impact, not monuments. The traditional response to death is to build monuments, literal monuments, buildings, statues, structures that bear your name, or metaphorical monuments, books, companies, fortunes, achievements that outlast you. This is understandable. This is human. This is the attempt to transcend death through permanence. But it's also often misguided, often ego-driven, often missing what actually matters. Because monuments crumble, books get forgotten, companies fail, fortunes dissipate, everything physical, everything external, eventually disappears. But impact, genuine impact on other humans, that creates ripples that continue. The teacher who inspired a student, who then inspires others, who then inspire others. The parent who raises a child with love, who then raises their children with love, who then raise their children with love. The creator who makes something that moves people, who then create things that move people, who then create things that move people. This isn't about monuments. It's about transmission, about passing something forward, about creating positive ripples that continue long after you're gone. And here's what makes this powerful. This kind of legacy doesn't require fame, doesn't require wealth, doesn't require extraordinary achievement. It just requires genuine impact on the people you touch, genuine care for those you encounter, genuine contribution to those you serve. Every person can do this. Every life can create these ripples. Every existence can matter in this way. Fourth principle, practice dying to practice living. This sounds strange, but it's profound. Many meditation traditions teach death meditation, visualizing your own death, experiencing it in imagination, not once, but regularly, repeatedly, until death becomes familiar rather than terrifying. And something remarkable happens through this practice. You become less afraid, less grasping, less desperate to hold on to what's temporary. You become more present, more appreciative, more able to fully experience what's here now. You become less attached to outcomes, less devastated by failures, less dependent on external validation. Because if you've already died, in meditation, in imagination, in full awareness, then you've already let go, already released, already transcended the fear that controls most humans. This creates a kind of freedom, of fearlessness, an ability to take risks that others won't take. Not because you're reckless, but because you've already faced the ultimate risk and survived it in consciousness. Fifth principle, find meaning in the finite itself. Here's where we return to the 3 stories from earlier. The 3 interpretations of life. The victim story, where external forces control everything, where your life doesn't really matter. The hero story, where you control your destiny, where your life is an epic journey of becoming. The cosmic accident story, where nothing matters, where life is meaningless in the grand scheme. But there's a 4th story, a story that transcends these 3, a story that the 9th ancient agreement reveals. It's the story of meaning infinitude. Your life matters, Not because it lasts forever. Not because you'll be remembered forever. Not because you'll achieve cosmic significance. Your life matters. Because it's happening. Because you're conscious. Because you're experiencing. Because you're choosing. Right now. The fact that it ends doesn't diminish this. The fact that you'll be forgotten doesn't diminish this. The fact that the universe is vast and indifferent doesn't diminish this. Right now, in this moment, you are alive. You are aware. You are experiencing existence. That itself is extraordinary, is miraculous, is meaningful. Not meaningful because of some external standard, some cosmic judge, some ultimate purpose. Meaningful because meaning is what consciousness creates. Through attention, through choice, you decide what matters. You create what's significant. You generate what's important through how you live, what you notice, what you value, what you do. The deeper tool, the ultimate mastery, the most sophisticated use of the ninth ancient agreement is to live so fully, so presently, so completely, that death,
when it comes, finds you already complete. Not because you've achieved everything, not because you've left the perfect legacy, not because you've built eternal monuments, but because you've lived, genuinely lived, fully inhabited your existence, fully expressed your nature, fully experienced your consciousness. You didn't postpone living until conditions were perfect.
You didn't delay meaning until you achieved success. You didn't wait for permission to be fully yourself. You lived now. You created meaning now. You expressed yourself now. And if death comes tomorrow, or in 50 years, it doesn't matter. Because you weren't waiting. You weren't postponing. You weren't saving your life for later. You were living it completely in every moment.
In every choice, in every breath. This is the ultimate freedom from the ninth ancient agreement. Not denying death, not fearing death, not bargaining with death, but using death as a teacher, as a clarifier, as a compass pointing toward what's real. The ancient Egyptians tried to defeat death through preservation, through ritual, through belief in literal afterlife.
Modern humans try to defeat death through legacy, through achievement, through being remembered. But both approaches miss something. They're still fighting death, still denying finitude, still grasping for permanence. The mastery is different. The mastery is acceptance. You will die. Everything you build will eventually dissolve. Everyone who knows you will eventually forget you.
This is not tragic. This is not depressing. This is not nihilistic. This is liberating. This is clarifying. This is the truth that sets you free. Free to live fully now. Free to create without attachment to outcomes. Free to love without fear of loss. Free to be completely yourself, without waiting for permission, without seeking validation,
without postponing life until some imagined future. As you settle into sleep now, into rest, into temporary cessation of consciousness, consider this. Sleep is practice for death, a nightly rehearsal, a small letting go. And every morning, you wake, you return, you get another day. But someday, you won't. Someday the sleep will be permanent, final, complete. Knowing this, really knowing this, how does it change tomorrow? How does it change your priorities, your choices, your focus? How does it change what you say to people you love, what you create, what you pursue? The ninth ancient agreement says death gives life meaning, and it does, profoundly, if you let it, not by fearing death, but by accepting it. Not by fighting death, but by learning from it. Not by denying death, but by using it as a compass, a teacher, a source of clarity. You have limited time, you will die. This is certain, and that certainty, that finitude, that mortality, it's not your enemy, it's your teacher. It's telling you, right now, in this moment, live, fully, completely, without postponement, without hesitation, without waiting. This is your life. This is your time. This is your existence. Don't waste it pursuing what doesn't matter. Don't sacrifice it for what you don't actually want. Don't postpone it for some imagined perfect future. Live it now. Create meaning now. Be yourself now, because death is coming, for all of us, and it doesn't wait. But until it comes, you have this moment, this breath, this choice. Make it count, make it real, make it yours. The ninth ancient agreement has controlled humans through fear for thousands of years, but it can liberate you. If you use it wisely, if you learn its lesson, if you accept its truth, you will die. And knowing this, really knowing this, how will you live? Living with the 9 ancient agreements you've traveled with me now. Through thousands of years, through 9 ancient agreements that still shape modern life. You must obey the king. Your worth equals your wealth. Your time belongs to someone else. Knowledge must be controlled. Your identity belongs to the group. The future belongs to those who, planet, pain and pleasure control everything. Stories create reality. Death gives life meaning. These aren't just historical curiosities. They are the invisible architecture of your daily existence. But now, you see them. And seeing them, understanding them, knowing how they work, changes everything. Because agreements only have power when they're invisible, when they seem like nature, like truth, like reality itself. Once you see them as agreements, as human constructs, they lose some of their control. For ambitious people, understanding these 9 agreements is essential. Most people never even see the game board. They just play the game, following rules they don't understand. But now you see the board, you understand the rules. This is the beginning of genuine power. Not power over others, but power over yourself, over your own thinking, over your own choices. Each agreement you now know can be used as a tool. The hierarchy agreement teaches you to navigate authority structures or create new hierarchies with better rules. The wealth agreement teaches you to pursue resources strategically while keeping your worth independent from your net worth. The time agreement teaches you to reclaim sovereignty over your hours, to own your days rather than renting them out. The knowledge agreement teaches you to filter information intelligently, to build genuine understanding. The identity agreement teaches you to hold group memberships lightly, to maintain an individual core beneath all social roles. The future agreement teaches you to think in longer time frames, to plant seeds that will grow beyond your lifetime. The pain-pleasure agreement teaches you to reprogram your responses, to find pleasure in difficulty. The story agreement teaches you to craft empowering narratives, to become your own storyteller. The death agreement teaches you to use mortality as a compass, to live fully now rather than postponing life. These tools give you power, clarity, agency, conscious choice, but it also comes with responsibility. You can use these tools for purely selfish gain, to manipulate, to exploit, or you can use them to build something genuine, to create real value while advancing your legitimate ambitions. How you use them, that's your choice, that's your responsibility. If this exploration has opened your eyes, please subscribe to continue discovering these hidden patterns, and share this with others who seek deeper understanding. As you drift now into sleep, let these 9 ancient agreements settle into your consciousness. Tomorrow, they'll be there, operating in every interaction. But you'll see them differently. You'll engage with them consciously. You'll use them strategically. The 9 ancient agreements have shaped civilization for thousands of years. But they're not unchangeable. They're just agreements, made by humans. And what humans created, humans can modify, can improve, can transcend. You now have the sight, the understanding. What you do with it, what you build with it. That's your story to write. Sleep well, ambitious one. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Use that vision wisely. Build something meaningful. Create something lasting. The 9 ancient agreements control the world. But they don't have to control you. Not completely. Not unconsciously. Not anymore. What you do with that freedom, that will determine everything. Rest now. Restore. Dream. And when you wake, see the agreements, use the agreements, and perhaps, someday, transcend the agreements entirely. Good night.